Suppose you have 100 euros, and I now make the following offer. I will give you 50% extra, so I'll add 50% to the amount of money that you have. Then I'll take away 50% of your money, and then we repeat this once. I increase the amount of money you have by 50%, then take away 50%. Finally, I will again increase the amount you have by 50%. The question is, should you take this deal? Well, as a rule of thumb, if a math teacher offers you a deal involving money, you should respectfully decline. But it may seem like you're better off here, right? I'm giving you money more often than I'm taking away money. So let's do the math. You start with 100 euros, and 50% of 100 is 50, so that means we're going to add 50 euros to this. And that means that you now have 150 euros. Now I'm going to take away money, however. And because our starting number is now larger, I will be taking away more than I gave you. 50% of 150 is 75. So I'm going to take away 75. And you are left with 150 minus 75 is 75 euros. But now we'll add 50% again. 50% of 75 will be less, however, than 50% of 100. So how much is it? Well, taking 50% of 75 means multiplying 75 by 0.5, changing the percentage into a decimal number. And 75 times 0.5 is 37.5. So we add 37.5 to 75, which is 112.5. And we can go on like this, but before we continue, I would like to point out that this way of calculating percentage change and writing down the results is quite inefficient. We can do much better, as we will see now, by thinking about percentage change in terms of multiplication by a certain factor. Let's look at an increase of 50% in a different way. If an amount, any amount, increases by 50%, the new amount will be the old amount, whatever we started with, plus this increase. Now the old amount is 100% of itself, right? A number is 1 times itself, so it is 100% of itself. And the increase is a percentage of the old number, in this case 50%. That means that our new amount is 150% of the old amount. And we can write 150% as a decimal number, moving the decimal point 2 places to the left and get 1.5. This means that increasing something by 50% is the same as taking 1.5 times the original number. A 50% increase is the same as multiplication by 1.5. And we saw this already. Basically, if an amount of 75 increases by 50%, we get 75 times 1.5 is 112.5, as we already saw. And this works for any number and any percentage change. If an amount increases by 20%, for instance, the new amount will be the old amount, so 100%, plus 20% is 120% of the old amount. So it will be 1.2 times the old amount. And this means a 20% increase is the same as multiplication by 1.2. And in general, this means that we can move from a percentage change to a multiplication factor. And this also works when the percentage change is a decrease. If an amount decreases by 20%, that means the new amount is the old amount minus 20%. So 100% of the old amount minus 20% of the old amount is 80% of the old amount. 80% as a decimal number is 0.8, so our new number is 0.8 times our old number. So a 20% decrease is the same as multiplication by 0.8. Understanding multiplication factors makes our calculations with percentages a lot faster and more efficient to write down. If we add 50% to some number, you change the percentage change to a multiplication factor in your head. You don't have to write that down. So you think 100% plus 50% is 150%, and 150% as a decimal number is 1.5. And what you write down is only the multiplication. Our starting number, 100, times 1.5 is 150. Then when we subtract 50%, We again change the percentage decrease to a multiplication factor in our head. 100% minus 50% is 50%. As a decimal number is 0.5. So subtracting 50% is the same as multiplying by 0.5. So we write down 150, which is our new starting number, times 0.5 is 75. And so on. The next change gives 75 times 1.5 is 112.5. Then we multiply that by 0.5, and then finally we multiply the result by 1.5. And we see that the final result is just under 84 euros and 40 cents. So you lose money on this deal, and you shouldn't take it. Here's a second possible offer though. You have 100 euros, and suppose I offer you to increase that amount by 100%, then take away 80%, then give you 200% of what you have then, and then finally subtract 5% of that. Should you take this deal? Of course, here you should pause the video and figure it out for yourself, because by now you know that you can't always trust a math teacher. So, using multiplication factors, this becomes a quick calculation. Adding 100% to our starting number means we end up with 200% of it. So we multiply it by 2. 100 euros times 2 is 200 euros. So that's good. But in the next step, you're taking quite a hit, because subtracting 80% means that we have only 100 minus 80 is 20% left. So that means we multiply by 0.2. 200 times 0.2 is 40. Now we add 200%, so that means we end up with 300% of our starting number, and that means we multiply it by 3. 40 times 3 is 120. And finally, subtracting 5% means we end up with 95% of our starting number, so that means we multiply it by 0.95. So subtracting 5% is the same as multiplication by 0.95. Our starting number is now 120 euros, and 120 euros times 0.95 is 114. So in this case, you would actually make a profit of 14 euros, or in general, of 14% of the amount of money that you have in the game. So I should emphasize that this offer, as opposed to the previous one, is of course hypothetical.